HGV driver shortages and a row over international law mean that some of Keir Starmer's allies and supporters are urging him to once again start talking about Brexit. Among those is Paul Mason. He has written in the New Statesman urging Labour to criticise the Tories' hard Brexit settlement. In that piece, Mason writes, "What will defeat this chaos-addicted government is a clear alternative, not just on economic and social priorities, but on trade, geopolitics and the constitution. And that means confronting the issue of Brexit. The Conservatives chose a hard Brexit. Skill shortages, goods shortages and energy shortages are the result. They sold British voters the fantasy of a global buccaneering nation, reliving its colonial heyday at the very moment the world economy began to harden into rival continental blocs. The result is geopolitical isolation, severe stress in the supply chain and the accelerated breakup of Britain." He goes on to say, "Britain cannot and should not return to the EU, but the alternatives to a hard Brexit are well known and entirely possible to achieve with goodwill. Britain should seek entry either to the or a single market for goods, reintegrate into European energy and labour markets, and resume strategic partnership over security and defence. That would solve the Northern Ireland border issue and remove the threat of trade friction across Britain in the event of Scottish independence." One person who doesn't think so is Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings. He tweeted, "One way Uberdud Starmer could make his dire position even worse is to listen to Mason, Jonathan Friedland and Andrew Adonis and start babbling about Brexit again. He missed mega open goal on the Met telling women to hail a bus. Crime, not Brexit, should be the Dud's focus. But obviously, he'll fail." Aaron, first of all, who is right, Paul Mason or Dominic Cummings?
Dominic Cummings is indisputably right, Michael. I mean, you can ask me another question. It's pretty clear what my views on Paul Mason's position, particularly on Brexit, has been. I think not only did the second referendum stuff help guarantee a hard Brexit, I'm not pinning that just on the people that wanted a second referendum, because there were people on the other side who wanted a hard Brexit. But by making the issue about a binary choice of a hard Brexit or remaining in the EU, the compromise position, which is what Jeremy Corbyn adopted successfully 2017, unsuccessfully through to May 2019, of customs union, single market alignment, that compromise position was killed. And it was killed by people like Paul Mason, who said that it was a fudge, that it wasn't good enough, that you need to pick a side. If you're down the middle of the road, you're going to get hit by a car. And now the same cheerleaders for a second referendum and stopping Brexit are saying, actually, we need to do what Jeremy Corbyn was talking about. And alongside the fact that they've guaranteed a hard Brexit, in doing so, they've also cleared the field of any credible spokespeople for a compromise going forward. The kinds of people that could say, let's have a customs union, let's talk about closer alignment with the European Union. We'll not be in the European Union, but we'll be more like Norway. That's going to be very hard to do, Michael, in British sort of civil society for the next 10 years, because the people that should and could have said it instead lost all credibility by trying to overturn the vote in the first place. I always said that we should have access to the single market, if not be in it. I thought something like a Norway deal was a very good idea. I was originally a Eurosceptic. I was going to vote leave, and once it became clear in the final weeks that actually that would mean, it increasingly did become clear from what Farage and Gove were saying, that we wouldn't have single market access either, I voted to remain because it was going to be a massive, massive shock. Either you want Britain, and this is a good argument, there's a Lexit argument says, I want Britain to be like Cuba, better off and slightly, not such good weather. But to build something from the bottom up, you can have massive state intervention. I think that's a plausible debate, but I didn't agree with it. I thought it was far too much, far too quickly, particularly when you've got a left leader of the Labour Party. So that's why I voted to remain in 2016, despite being a Eurosceptic, because what is now happening was clearly too much too quickly, and it's going to be a huge, huge shock, mostly negative in many ways. Doesn't mean there aren't some advantages that the left can press home, however. So I think Paul's got it really badly wrong. I think he's got it really badly wrong throughout that piece, actually, and not just in relation to Brexit. He talks about how, Keir Starmer now has that one more heave theory of political change. He was presenting Keir Starmer as the one more heave in the early months of last year, saying, We just need Corbyn with a bit of hair gel and a bit of professionalism, and that'll get us into power. Now he's saying, the complete opposite. So Paul, sadly, is about as politically coherent as a wet flannel that you forget exists and you leave it behind the shampoo for 3 months and it's kind of disintegrated. That's kind of how I feel about Paul Mason's political opinions. Now, he's a very sharp guy on many things. I agree with him about some of the subject matter in my book about technological change and capitalism and politics. But on Starmer, on Brexit, and on contemporary British politics, he's all at sea. Dominic Cummings, you're right.
Let's go back to the substance of the Brexit issue, because the point you make, which I think is very important. I mean, you made a number of important points, but one that I think is especially difficult for Labour right now is that they can't really have any opinion on Brexit because all of their credibility was destroyed by trying to overturn the original result. And there was a very good example of this on Question Time this week. You're going to see Alison McGovern responding to a question about Dominic Cummings admitting the Tories never had any intention of sticking to the terms of their Brexit deal.
There's a whole host of other things that we could talk about post-Brexit that similarly we've got to build on and make better so that people can have a prosperous life right across the United Kingdom. But I do feel it makes me slightly cynical about some of the promises that were made about this.
To be fair, Alison, when Boris Johnson, David Frost was trying to negotiate a deal, you were too busy trying to go against the will of the people, and you're campaigning for a second referendum. And that's just the truth. The reality is the people of this country voted to leave the European Union.
It's all very well to criticise those of us who
were trying to get a deal when the Prime Minister was trying to get a deal in 2019, or were trying to frustrate the will of the people. Which one?
But Samuel, the question is it acceptable that the protocol was fudged to get an oven-ready Brexit deal over the line?
Let me answer this point.
Briefly, though, Alison, because then I need to bring in the rest of the panel.
About frustrating the will of the people. Actually, what we needed was to bring people together and to find a way forward. And what I tried to do throughout the whole process was to find compromises and to work together. And in the end, it just became impossible. Now, of course, now we're in this situation. To be honest, I think we need to put that behind us. And we need to look at where we are and say, we've got this agreement, let's build on it.
It's just not credible to say Labour's policy was trying to bring people together. A second referendum wouldn't have brought people together, But by the point of the 2019 general election, I thought Labour probably had to back a second referendum because they'd been leading on the Remainers for so long. To be honest, I regret that now. But the claim that was to bring people together just never stood up, right? So if you're still saying that now, it's just not credible. I think if she'd have said on that panel, yeah, sorry, we wanted to remain and we thought we could remain. That's all over now. But, I'm here being honest, it would have been a bit more credible. So going back to this, he says, one way Uber dud Starmer could make his dire position even worse is to listen to Mason et al. And he goes on, he missed mega open goal on the Met telling women to hail a bus. Crime, not Brexit, should be the dud's focus. But obviously he'll fail. Talking about crime is not always popular with some of our core audience. That's fine. Lots of legitimate reasons behind that. I do think what he said there, though, about the Met was very telling, because the open goal, missed by Keir Starmer, was to say, look, yes, to be tough on crime, you also sometimes have to be tough on the police, right? And the police completely failed here. They've had 6 months to work out what their response is, and they're telling people to hail a bus if they feel vulnerable or if they're not sure if a cop is a cop. Keir Starmer couldn't go on the attack there because all he could do is go on the radio and say, oh, actually, I think Cressida Dick's a brilliant person. I'm pro-police. I'm not really comfortable criticising the police. And I think Cummings summarises quite well why Keir Starmer is a dud. Because a successful politician who was capable of doing even, the bare minimum of populist rhetoric would recognise that you have to criticise the police if you want to be credible. Whereas Keir Starmer thinks to be credible, he has to criticise no one. He's got a pro-establishment bias, which is essentially stronger than Tony Blair's. Aaron, I want to know your thoughts on, I know you agreed with Cummings when it came to Brexit versus Paul Mason. What about Uber dud Starmer should focus on crime?
I think the right and the principled and the popular position would have been to say, what the hell is going on? That the London Metropolitan Police Service is saying, hail down a bus. A, that's ridiculous. B, the person responsible for this should be fired. Cressida Dick should go. She should have her resignation letter on the front, desk of the Home Secretary's the Home Secretary's desk first thing tomorrow morning. Quite obvious. And that's, by the way, what should happen. Not just what should be popular, because it is popular, but what should happen. It's because, Michael, like you say, Keir Starmer is not about trying to build political legitimacy or trying to even be popular or trying to even win. The core driving dynamic within Keir Starmer as a politician is fidelity to the establishment. There will be absolutely no conditions under which he criticises the London Metropolitan Police Service or the British military or actually any of the core institutions of the British state. Now, that's how the Labour right does stuff. But equally, like you say, Michael, a Blair figure, for instance, knew when you had to transgress those norms, because those were his norms too. If you think about Blair taking the lead when it came to the death of Princess Diana, massively stepped on the toes of the royal family and the British monarchy. Massively. He really overstepped the mark, actually. But hey, it really did wonders for his public image, didn't it? And that's what Tony Blair cared about. Keir Starmer is constitutionally incapable of doing that. And that's a problem for him as a politician, but it's even more of a problem for anybody who cares about the Labour Party, not just being a vehicle for socialist policy, being a vehicle for literally solving basic problems. If the police are incapable of solving crimes, if they're poorly led, if they are more interested in getting their excuses in for bent coppers on the inside than actually doing their job, then we need political leaders who call that out for what it is. If we keep on engaging in foreign wars overseas, which time after time fail, and the legacy of them is to inflame regional conflicts, to create a fertile ground for terrorist networks, to bring hundreds of people back to this country in body bags, and while we're all doing that, we spend tens of billions of pounds. Yes, my contention is we need a leader of the Labour Party who is critical of the British foreign policy establishment. For Keir Starmer, again, that's just outlandish. How dare you? Foreign policy establishment, the police, the Bank of England, the economic model we've had for the last 10 years. And Starmer says, our economic model is broken. First of all, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is a guy that did economics for dummies with Ed Miliband and Charlie Faulkner. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Secondly, if the Confederation of British Industry and the Bank of England and all the boys at the old clubs in Mayfair and central London say, this is what we're doing, that's what the Labour Party is doing with Keir Starmer as its leader. The idea that somehow this guy is going to be the overseer, the enabler of even moderately progressive change is so absurd. I mean, it is so completely at odds with what he actually is. I mean, it's almost like a joke, Michael. The idea he could be the British Biden. Biden's actually got something about him, and he's old enough to care, to not care rather, that he can kind of turn on some of his historical politics. Keir Starmer clearly is not. The idea that he is going to create something different to the status quo, but forget it. The Tories know that we need a break with the status quo on a bunch of things far better than Keir Starmer does. So not only is he incapable of solving the problems, he's also not going to be able to appeal to the British electorate. So we have a dud, Michael, and we also have duds in his cheerleaders like Paul Mason.